dear listener. Welcome to Surviving Service. This is Kat. And on this episode, we're going to really talk about how it feels in our body to experience burnout. We talk about this idea of burnout a lot, but what is it? How does it feel? And if you pay attention, you'll start to notice in this episode how our energies go from being exhausted and burned out to something that's a lot more energized and excited. Really emphasizing that community and joy and connecting and commiserating and laughing together can really help us reclaim our energy and our spark. If any of this resonates with you, if you have weird symptoms of burnout that you want to share, or some tips and tricks and tools to help you manage burnout or reduce its effects, please send them our way. We'd love to have a listener episode where we can share out what the community has provided. And you can share those to our email at survivingservicepod@gmail.com. All right, now let's get to the good stuff. Let's dive in. Welcome to Surviving Service. I'm Kat Davis.
And I'm Erin Riley.
And this is a podcast that recognizes so many of us in the service industry set ourselves on fire to keep others warm until our flame just extinguishes. That's right, today we're going to dive into burnout. What is it? What are the weird symptoms? How do we manage it? And how do we prevent it? But before we dive in, let's take a moment to ground to the space. So, Erin.
Yes, Kat.
Erin, we are talking about burnout, which can be really overwhelming. So, how's your heart today? How's your body? How are you feeling?
Tired. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm very tired. But, not without hope, which is always great. It's not like the bottom of the pit type of a feeling. It's just like I feel like I have a flu, if that makes sense.
It does.
Without that's the tiredness in my body right now.
Like the weighted blanket that's not soothing.
Yeah. How about you? How are you? How's your heart today?
Oh, I am feeling pretty good. I think my heart is apprehensively drawn to a lot of different creative spaces right now, and I'm preemptively anxious about becoming overwhelmed. So I'm trying to just enjoy being right here, right now.
Yes.
And not be anxious in anticipation of becoming anxious.
Right. But that's so hard to do. I mean, I know that I'm also partially tired because tomorrow's actually my last day at my old job. And as much as I want to use all these coping skills that I've learned from Jen the therapist and not anticipating that it's a fight, it's like I can't help. That's partially the reason why I needed to resign, is because I constantly feel like I'm going to have to fight about something. I have to be on the defense. I have to do justification of why I did this or what I did. Anyway, tomorrow we go over transition, which is just a big, go over this piece of paper and tell us what you've been doing.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
It's exhausting to me when people ask, what do you do for a living? Or what is your job like? Because it's so much to try and unpack and explain. And I'm like, do you really want to know?
Can we ask, let's just stop asking that.
Yeah.
I know that that's so easy when you're the get to know you questions, but I feel like as a society, as a community, let's stop asking people that question, because it's so big. Yeah.
And so the idea of having to answer that at a cocktail party sounds exhausting, but also having to answer that with a group of people that should kind of already know what you've been up to and ideally have been following this and should be able to sort of pick it up where you left off. It just sounds like I understand. It sounds tiring.
Yeah.
Sounds like a big old nap is in order.
Yes, I think after this we will be napping to the chagrin of Lola.
Oh,
here.
Lola.
She would love to take more walkies, but
she's like, Mother, there's so many squirrels to be chased.
Yes, that's exactly.
Mother.
Well, and I think she's particularly Mama, I saw a squirrel in that cage next to the neighbors. Could we please go investigate? No, there were so many squirrels. She was pulling very hard at her walk earlier. So, but on a positive note, This girl helps a lot. This dog of mine.
Yeah.
She sparks the joys in my life. I laugh at her quite a bit.
Tell us a little bit about Lola.
Oh, well,
What's Lola like?
she's a special girl. She's a doodle, and before anybody thinks anything about that, I rescued this girl. She was in the mountains as a stray, which surprises everybody, and I'm like, "I know,
Because she's a
but,
princess.
doesn't matter the breed, every breed is gonna get abandoned at some point, or, as I say, she escaped her captors."
Yes.
Because she definitely, had puppies already, and so
Oh.
we think she was a breeding dog, and she's like, "Ah, this life is not for me." And now she's
Mm-hmm.
come down to be a city dog, which is also funny because, like, the city is not that big.
It's big enough for her, though.
But yeah, she is kind of derpy sometimes, and, she's also very stubborn. Like, she can be very cuddly, and then she'll be like, "I'm done. See ya." Which feels very much like me at some points, probably, where I'm like, "Oh, this is nice. Get away. I don't wanna touch anybody now."
Yeah, we're done now. She's the sweetest girl, and she's got very expressive little human eyes, which is weird, but I love her so
Yes.
much for it. She's such a diva, such a
Oh
princess.
my gosh, for sure. I think it's funny because it's like when you think about burnout, I think it's different for everybody, right? When I think about burnout, the way that I'm feeling, it's exactly how I'm feeling right now, which is I don't want to do anything. I don't want to talk about anything to do with work. I had the Sunday scaries, but it's like a persistent all the time.
Yeah, your body's constantly tense. What are your first like your first warning signs of burnout, you know?
I actually have no idea because I feel like I've been in a constant state of moving from one nonprofit to another, to another, to another. And I actually, after 10 years in service work, after a decade, I had my first vacation last year. So,
Oh my gosh, what?
yeah,
That's
so
so long.
right. And so, like, because I just didn't get paid enough
Hmm.
to do things. So, yeah,
Did you
so
not get like PTO time?
I did, but, like, all my PTO would usually go to things like, "Oh, I've got to switch my medications."
Oh yeah, so you have to take some time to let your body do
Yeah,
that. Yeah, so your PTO time is really used for obligations.
right, or, like, recovering. It would always be in town
Hmm.
usually. I think I went on vacation with my parents, and that was when I was, like, I don't know, that was maybe 5 years ago? Yeah, 5
Mm.
years ago, and figured out what I don't like to do on vacation. We have very different vacationing styles.
Yeah.
Just say that. I love
It's
them.
important to learn, but it's hard to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know, that's an interesting question, and I think, yeah, we'll see. I guess Jen the therapist, I call her Jen the therapist because I have a bunch of Jens in my life, so there's, like, Jen the cousin, Jen the sister-in-law, Jen the therapist,
I just like the idea that her title is Jen the therapist.
right. I think we're gonna hopefully kinda dive into, like, slowing down and not,
Yes.
you know yeah. Anyway, but what about you? Do you have any warning signs that you notice?
Similarly to you, I would say I feel like I was really in a burnout sprinting mode for a couple years. At the very least, the full 5 years at my last role. And when I think back about signs that I was really just burned out, and to me, that means totally lacking energy or motivation to do much of anything and not having the capacity for seeking out joyful experiences, things that would re energize me because I just need to rest because I'm like so exhausted from the churn and burn or whatever it is. I started to really notice that, and it's only something I can notice retroactively, but I would get so tired. This is something we were just talking about. I would get so tired whenever people would ask me about my job or how it's going, I would be like, ugh. Like, I
Mhm.
just don't, like, it's so much. Do you really care? And if you care, I am going to tell you about it, but it's a lot. It's a lot to manage, and I'm exhausted and trying to manage all of it. And then I would find myself getting really cranky and frustrated when people would give me suggestions about
Mm.
it. Like, oh, have you tried this? Or you should just do that. Or, why don't you just, go and write a whole thing or do this whole new program? And it would be really sweet. Like, oh, you should go and get students excited about a recycling initiative or a energy reduction campaign. And I'm like, I love this that you're so excited and want to help. I literally cannot even listen to suggestions without feeling overwhelmed. So, and then the other thing I would notice is anytime I would take time off. So I was working basically like around the clock. I'd be answering emails up into the night and stuff. So I didn't really notice how it affected me until I would have an absence of that. And so I would
Mm.
take around a week, week and a half off around winter break. Around Christmas, we get usually Christmas Eve, Christmas, and New Year's Day off at the job I was at. And so I'd just take a whole week or 2 weeks and be like, sweet, I'm going to like chill. I'm going to do some puzzles. I'm going to like create some stuff. And I would have a full on anxiety attack after the first 3 days. And I think what it was is that my body was so tense and so anxious all the time. And I had been directing that tense anxiety, just shriveled central nervous system at my work. And then in the absence of that, I didn't have anything to direct it towards. And I would just turn into this just teary, anxious mess. And so I had to give myself a couple days to overcome the anxiety. And now it's same with vacations. I would have to give myself a few days to actually get into my vacation mode where I could just let myself be kind of tense for the first few days and then be like, okay, I can finally actually sit and be still. Well, I don't know about still. Still is
Mm.
still hard for me to be. But I can try and find that ability to focus on something and relax a little bit. But just noticing that it would anytime I had stillness, it would just attack me.
Mm. Right. I'll say what was really nice about my one and only adult vacation was that I went to Mexico and did not have access to,
Mm,
anything work related. I couldn't. I actually could
yeah.
not get it, and so I was like, "Oh, this is nice," and we were, like, at a resort, and
Yeah.
but that is also a luxury and a privilege and not necessarily, like, something that anybody.
I do think that's a good point that that's something that I think contributes to burnout and is so sneaky in our culture, at least in the US, is the expectation that you're on all the time. And so my last role, it felt like the whole culture sort of expected you to be on all
Yeah.
the time because people were sending emails well into the evening.
Ugh,
And so I would feel like I was expected to reply to emails,
right.
and all of those things. And I had it on my personal phone. So I would see it pop up and I would get sucked back into work mode. And right now I'm feeling very, very grateful because the one big difference between my last role and this one that I think has helped me protect myself from burnout a little bit is that I do actually have a phone specifically for my
Mm,
work email and my work number, which is I did not realize how huge that was, but it seems to be a practice of most people in the organization to really like put their phones away and put their work stuff away at 5ish. And so I make a practice now of like putting my work phone in my, drawer or something and just not looking at it. Because even if I just look at it, I
yeah,
will get pulled back into work mode,
right.
and I'll check it. And so I try to hide it from myself. But that's also a privilege to be able to not have my work communications on my personal phone because even when it's on my personal phone I would if I was checking my personal email I would just see the icon for my work email and get pulled back into it and it would just take my energy.
No, I get that. I had to mute all of like, when I did it, it's so ridiculous. I was actually expected to have things on my phone, but I
Mm.
would mute all the notifications or make it so that it wouldn't give me push notifications because I was like, that's people didn't have boundaries specifically,
Mm.
and we worked across the country, so, like, I get it
Right.
sometimes to a certain extent, but what really
Mm.
irritated me was when people would contact me while they were on PTO. Go on PTO, right? Like,
I know that.
I don't know why we're having this conversation because it's actually not a big deal, and you think it's a big deal, but it's not, or there's should be somebody else taking care of that and not you. And so it just
Right.
bother me because that feels like the expectation then. And that's a really slippery slope, especially when an
Right.
organization's like, "No, we really value work-life balance." And it's like, then can you talk to the handful of people who do X, Y, and Z while they're supposed to not be at work and on PTO? Or messaging me at
Mm.
11 PM about something ridiculous because a Facebook
Ugh.
ad was wrong. It and I couldn't even change it. I had to go through another person, so I'm like, at 11 PM, like, I'm not getting in until 8:30,
Right.
so I guess you could say, "Oh, it was because it was top of mind and you would get in the morning," but why do you even care at 11? Why do you
Right.
care at 11?
Yeah.
So anyway, this is just a gripe about silly stuff, but
No, it's true though.
those things are burnout. I mean, like, I think when I did not want to come to work, that was really when I just nothing seemed like I didn't want to do anything. I didn't I didn't even want to do parts of the job that I know that I liked doing.
Mhm.
And everything just was a big struggle. It felt like walking through cement all the time. Now, I should also
Ugh.
say, there's also a health issue. There's a health aspect of that, right? That was like contributing to it. But I think to help with this in this new job is to one, remind myself that I don't have to prove anything to anyone. They already
Mhm.
know. They already know what I'm doing, so much so that they've asked we went through this whole thing, right? So, like, one, they already know what my value is to their organization, and they know that I am an expert at what I am about to be doing. I have to remind myself of that. So
Yes.
I don't because I think with these other jobs too was always I have to prove myself. I have to prove like I have to work 110% because who knows about the job, like all the stuff.
Yes.
And so that too contributes to burnout really, really quickly because you've already set yourself up. I could never live up to my expectations or standards. It wasn't sustainable.
100% not sustainable, and it's really hard when you set that expectation from the beginning that you're always going to be available
Mm.
because you're trying to be a good employee and try to be a good team player. And so you're like, I'm here, I'll say yes to everything, I'll respond promptly. And then there's this expectation that, like, oh, that's just the way Erin is, and now I can, like, you're teaching
Yeah.
other people how to communicate with you.
Yes.
And that's really slippery.
Yes, and that's what Jen, the therapist, and I also talked about was like, yeah, it's really weird because you are a go-getter and you're doing all these things and then it's not sustainable. It's not that you're not doing the work, but it doesn't look like you're doing the work now because you're not going out of the way and you're not doing
Yes.
110% and you're kind of not happy. And that's probably not all organizations. Just happens to be for me in the last few organizations that I've worked with is like, oh man, what is wrong with her? It's like, oh no, I'm actually doing my job. Like, there's nothing wrong with me at all. I'm actually doing what I should be doing. I'm doing, like, what you're paying me for, but it doesn't look like that anymore. You think there's something wrong
Yeah.
because, yeah, that's not how I set myself up. So,
Hmm.
boundaries. I hear that's how you can prevent some burnout.
I hear that there's a theory, there's an academic theory. We're going to test it. And I'm excited because I think this episode will come out a few weeks into the new year. And so I'm hoping people can start to identify if they're noticing these things and these habits and these patterns. I have a particular New Year's resolution or seed I want to plant around my capacity and protecting it and to avoid that burnout so I can continue to come to work and have full energy and put everything that is reasonable and exciting into my work because I do have some exciting projects ahead I'm excited about, so much excitement. But I also want to have energy outside of work.
Mhm.
So I think that setting those expectations and boundaries in a really clear way from the beginning is going to be really helpful. And if people are finding that they feel expected to respond to emails late at night, I think being able to have a really clear conversation with your supervisor or whomever is even sending those. And even just asking when I receive an email from
Mhm.
you, is the expectation that I should be responding after work hours? And if so, I think advocating for some comp time, I think, is really important. So I'm salaried, and therefore overtime doesn't exist. And I've had those conversations with supervisors in the past where I've said, due to whatever, whether it's having to stay late for community events, we have board meetings we have to stay late for, we have, end up just working late some days. It's just what happens. You have ebbs and flows of the work. So I've said, if I need to comp my time because I've found that I really have worked late every day this week, can I take, a short day on Friday and not have
Mm.
to mess with my timesheet about it?
Mhm.
And they've been pretty understanding. They've also been
Flex
like,
it.
you're
They'll
in
"Can
yeah,
I
flex it.
flex
That's
my
the word.
time?"
Can I flex my time? And they've all been like, you're an adult. Do what you got to do. But that's also because they trust me, which is nice. And not
Right.
everybody has that. Yeah.
No, and it's interesting because, like, sometimes you think you have that, so I think it's,
Yeah.
I think this
Just
boils down to
clear
hopefully you're
communication is
working
important.
for somebody that you trust so that you can have conversations with, and I think I might have said this last time, right, was as I've gotten, like, after almost 11 years, maybe
Hmm.
more, maybe 12 years, I don't know. After over a decade of working in these spaces, it is now, maybe also turning 40, I've
Yeah.
gotten to a space where I feel more comfortable being like, "Nope, I'm going to advocate for myself, and I'm going to say what I need, even though it's hard, I'm gonna ask questions and then remind myself that it's, not about me if the reaction is not particularly stellar, and that maybe that's a time to understand whether you should be having more conversations or whether you should be looking for another job."
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, if you have the trust to be able to have that conversation in person, that's great. But I also think there's something really valuable about having it in writing. So maybe responding to
Mhm.
one of those late emails at appropriate work hour time and say, hey, here's my response to what you asked for. Like, please let me know if you're expecting me to respond to these, late night emails immediately.
Or if you're fine if it's getting back to
Yeah.
you, like, when I'm
Yeah.
in.
It's always nice to show them that you care.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I'm meeting your expectations and providing clear and responsive communication for you. So my intention is to reply to late night emails first thing in the morning, but just like making sure that it's like in writing. Even that is probably
Oh
too
gosh,
nice.
document everything. Get
Yeah,
everything in
document
writing.
everything. Because I also have been this way in the past. I personally get really exhausted and tired at 3 p.m. And
Mhm.
so sometimes I'll need to just like dip out of my brain for a while and then have some more energy around 9. I usually schedule send. If you're like that, be a schedule sender and schedule your emails to send in the morning when everybody else is looking at them. You can do that on most emailing apps. Or one of my colleagues in the past had a really great line underneath their signature that said, I might be emailing you at times that are out of office hours, but I do not expect you to respond,
Yeah.
or something like that. And I really appreciated that. Little things like that where you can just really communicate to the people you're talking with.
Right.
This is my expectation for you because you might be accidentally, unknowingly triggering their energy and their burnout outside of office hours when you might not need to.
I think some signs for me is when I, feel like I can't give grace to anybody. I can't see anybody,
Yeah,
like, my brain immediately jumps to, "This person's doing me wrong." Like, little things where if I could just take some time and have some space and breathe, understanding that using empathy, asking questions, keeping an open mind,
absolutely. Yeah.
it's really hard for me to see that other people's intentions aren't negative. Maybe that's a better way of saying it, like,
Yeah,
"Oh."
when you're especially exhausted.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, "Ugh, they're clearly doing X, Y, and Z," and then, then they're in front of your face and you're having a conversation, you're like, "Oops,
Yeah.
my brain went to that little space," but, like, that's really hard to do when you're already exhausted, and when you're
Yeah.
already like that's what I would say burnout is. All the energy I have is to get up in the morning, get ready, sit at this desk, and do the bare minimum. Now you're asking me to, like, flex something that I don't know if I can do right now. Like, that to me is a problem. That to me is burnout, you know?
Yeah.
I think a symptom of burnout. Here's some fun symptoms of burnout right now is that, like I said, I haven't been at work for 2 weeks now. It feels like forever. It's only been 2
Oh,
weeks,
interesting.
which when I think about that, that's not a lot of time. So of course I'm really exhausted. My lymph nodes are swollen. I don't
Mm.
have a sore throat, but I wake up with headaches every morning. My body's achy and I'm exhausted until a really fun thing that always happens to me is until it's 10 p.m. And then I'm like, what can I eat? And where can I go? Like, now I've got to
Yeah.
watch all these episodes of things. And I'm like, what? No, just just 2 hours ago, you could barely keep your eyes open. Why can't we do that
Mm.
right now?
Yeah.
Please. I just want to go
Yeah,
to
you're
sleep.
just total your whole body is just not regulating the
No,
way that you're
exactly.
like wanting it to.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then it's like, yeah, then I try to do all the things, take a bath, you know. I'm
Mm.
trying to be very nice to myself, but it's really frustrating because I also want to do things where I'm like, I want to create and I want to craft. Well, how can you do that when your brain
Yeah.
and your body is so tired? I want to enjoy the thing. I don't want, like, for instance, I'm trying to get this cross stitch thing done, and I do need to pay attention because it's a mosaic, so I have to
Hmm.
switch thread, floss all the time. But
Yeah.
then it takes a certain amount to be like, "Okay, I do have to focus."
Hmm.
And if I'm not really focusing, then it's not gonna turn out well. Because then
Right.
you're gonna skip things and do all this stuff, but I'm like, "But I want to do that," because it also calms me, but I'm
Yeah.
like, "But my body is so tired. I'm so
Yeah.
tired. I'm
I
so
love
tired."
crocheting for that too. And I'm always like, crocheting is kind of a mindless activity. I'm like, who? No, there, you have to count and you
Yes.
have to pay attention or else you end up in a very sticky situation. But
Yeah.
my like transition activity from completely melted butter to trying to be a full loaf of bread. I don't know what that analogy is, but that's what I think of in
To
terms of
to a
like
stick of butter, you mean?
to a stick of butter. Yeah. I don't know. The butter's got some other ingredients, I guess, if it's going to become bread. But, anyways, I'm trying to transition from just way non-functional burnout into like actually able to enjoy something is usually like a puzzle and a show that I've seen before that is comforting, probably like Gilmore Girls or
Oh my god.
something, like something where I
You
just
think a
like
puzzle's comforting? I'm the worst
I love a
puzzler. Oh my
puzzle.
gosh, like, we joke about how bad I am. My friend
That's
Christine, who
so
is
funny.
actually my very good friend, Christine, shamed me one time because I was like, "Oh, this piece must go in." She's like, "Oh my god."
What?
So now it's just like a running joke where it's just like,
Yeah,
I can't do any puzzles because I'm, like, afraid
that's
of the
hilarious.
shame and the fear of the shame that I'm going to
No.
have because I'm like, "You're right. I don't have the capacity to put pieces onto pieces." But that's just
That's
goes to
so funny.
show that everybody is different, right? Like,
Everyone's
to
different.
me,
Yeah.
that is not a relaxing thing. I'd have to take up way more energy to try to figure it out, but I like this really ridiculous matching game on my phone,
Oh,
right? Like that.
nice. Perfect.
And basically, it's like a little town, and sometimes you just go into shops and you're actually looking for something
Cute.
in a timed, which also is a joke because Christine would always try to talk to me, and I'm like, "I'm on a timer. I'm on a
I'm on
I'm
a
on a
timer.
timer."
I am very busy right now.
I'm very busy trying to find these things in 2 minutes and
Yeah.
get all the prizes.
I mean, I love a strategy game. Like, I play Settlers of Catan online for fun, which is like a strategy board game, and there's a timed element in it. So, yeah, little things like that that can just basically get your brain out of whatever anxious spinning space it's in and help kind of to unravel it to focus on something outside of yourself, I think can be so healing and so helpful for calming your brain down. I call them transition activities. The last couple of months, I really haven't been able to do anything outside of that. So, like, come home, be exhausted, play my games online, go to bed. Never quite
Yeah.
getting to the like creative, enjoyment, fulfilling,
Right.
social part of my life that I hope to achieve someday. That's the goal this year. We're getting there.
I mean, I have been watching and rewatching, which actually helps me when I wanna cross stitch all these old Real Housewives
Oh
of New
yeah,
York, mainly because
classic.
I started it because they have the best Christmas episodes,
They do.
and so that's how I got back on it, and I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'll just go through this," because that was the show also during the pandemic that I
Mm.
just watch over and over. It's like something it's just like a warm blanket, but then I don't have to pay attention to
As
that.
they like scream at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's cathartic to watch them just lose it.
Yeah, I mean, the psychology of it all,
Yeah,
I just love it. Um, yeah,
it's so
so
ridiculous.
but again, it's a great, thing to see in pop culture, and then you just get to dissect all of it.
Give you
Um,
something outside of your own nonsense to
yeah,
think
because, like,
about.
I'm not in a relationship, so I don't have to worry about all that bullshit, but I definitely can live vicariously through. So, like, if you can, get yourself a therapist, shop around. They're really
Mhm.
helpful to help with burnout.
I think having somebody who's there solely for you and is so important. Like my therapist always, because I always try to be like, "How are you doing? How was your holidays?"
Oh
And
god,
he's like,
I'm like the worst because I don't wanna go to in too much. I don't wanna know too much about Jen. It's my time.
"I,
It's my
I."
time.
Well, that's what he's trying to help me with. Is he'll be
That's
like,
good.
I can absolutely tell you, but this space is really for you. Is knowing that going to help you in some way? Or is this like for me, I actually think it's almost like a nervous tick where like
Mm,
I feel like in order for me to deserve receiving attention, I need to make the other person feel seen and have them have attention first.
not in
And
therapy, not in therapy.
yeah, and not in therapy. It's all about me. And so I've been trying really hard to lean into that and just let it be about me. But that's something that I think also causes burnout is when you're so busy tending to literally everything outside
Mm,
of you that you can't tend to yourself. So even if it's just 1 hour a week or a month or whatever it is, being able to sit with someone whose job it is to make you talk about yourself, think about yourself, tend to you and not tend to them at all. It's really hard at first, but it's really good. And it can take a while to find somebody that you really vibe with, but it's
right.
definitely worth it.
And everything does go back to your parents, so just know that that's what you're stepping into.
Yeah.
But you can still also have a relationship with your parents. It's okay. No, we're not gonna go into that much, but I did wanna say, it is tough, and, you do have to shop around a little bit, and, I found luckily, because she was the only one who took my insurance at the time, but it was great.
Yeah.
I just happenstance, and now there's a waiting list for her, so I can never leave her.
Yeah. So, if you're out there and you don't know if therapy is covered by your organization, it's worth looking to see if they have EAP benefits,
Yes.
which is Employee Assistance Program.
Mhm.
I think, and a lot of times people think that's supposed to be reserved for if you lose a loved one or if you're dealing with like a huge transition in life, but you can use the EAP benefits for it's like 3 or 6 free therapy sessions with a
Per
provider.
topic.
Oh, really? Per topic? Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was
So just
total.
a little life hack, it's actually per topic. So if you are like, "Wow, I still really need something," they can just go back and say, the first 3 sessions, we
Yeah,
talked about family. The second 3 sessions, we talked about work. Like, it's actually per issue.
interesting. That's cool. That's
Yeah,
really good to know. Life
yeah.
hack. And I think that's important to tap into if you have it available because even if you don't know what you want to talk about, just being in the practice of just spending some time to focus on yourself, it's really important. So even if you're not actively suffering, which a lot of those of us in the, nonprofit public space culture world life often just like I said earlier, put ourselves on fire to keep others warm, it can feel like guilty or like, oh, I don't deserve this because I'm not suffering enough. But it's like, no.
Self-indulgent.
Self indulgent, that's the word. the guilty pleasure.
Mhm.
That's not what it
It's
is.
not.
It's literally minimum, minimum self care. That is like first step, you know. And then maybe
Yeah.
someday you'll let yourself get a massage. Ooh,
Ooh. Oh, those are
ooh.
wonderful. If only insurance
That's
paid for those.
yeah. Well, some do, depending on if you can make the argument.
No,
Look
what
into
I
the
found
benefits.
out is if you have FSA or HSA, you can actually get
Oh,
your physician to write that off. You just need
okay,
to have a
cool. To pay
justification
for
letter.
it.
So see all these fun new hacks that I found that
Yeah.
out. You can like get it as a write-off and get reimbursed as long
Yeah.
as you have a doctor's note to justify why that should be a medical.
Mm. You can also buy like period products with the FSA,
I
which I didn't
know. I bought
realize.
sunscreen. I bought a bunch of sunscreen. I
That's
bought
so cool.
acne patches too are covered.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't know that either. I mean, like, it's really nice.
Yeah,
Um,
might as well. If you got extra at the end of the year, it doesn't roll over,
oh my
might as
gosh, I
well.
had so much extra this year.
Ooh,
Mainly
nice.
because I have 2 insurances.
Yeah,
So,
that helps.
which my other insurance paid for an ambulance ride
Oh, wow.
to the ER. Yeah. They
Hmm.
were like, "Guess what? We'll cover this." And I'm like, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah. And then you're
Phew.
like, FSA shopping spree.
That's exactly what it was. I was like, I have 4 pairs of glasses now from Warby
Nice.
Parker.
Well,
Um,
it's like you're paying into it. You got to use it.
yeah, exactly. Yes, because mine's FSA, so if I don't
Yeah.
use it, I lose it.
Fun.
Sometimes you'll at in this show, you'll get little hacks,
Little life hacks.
for benefits hacks.
Yeah. Again, we don't get much. So we got to make the most of what we got.
And it made me
So,
really joyful when I was like, "I still have $500 to spend," and then
oh
I,
my
like,
gosh.
went through the FSA store, and I was like, "Oh
Nice.
my gosh,
That's so funny.
this
It's
is
like the
all so
healthiest
wonderful."
online shopping habit you can do.
Yes.
That's awesome. I love it.
Me too.
So, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier, which was around when you're burned out, it's hard to give other people like the benefit of the doubt.
Mm,
And I wanted to bring that up because when we're doing really justice centered community work, a lot of the community practices I like to include at the beginning of our time together is to assume positive intent, but also attend to outcomes, and impact. But really trying to like make sure that if we're in a community building space, people feel like they can share things, knowing that they will be given the grace to mess up, and that they will be informed in a really gentle and community oriented way if they did cause any harmful impact. And the reason I wanted to mention that is because we've talked a lot about how it's like the system that is designed to make us feel isolated and make us feel. I mean, we're talking about burnout. It literally snuffs our capacity and our agency to do anything outside of work, much less like give more to our meaningful work that we're all trying to do. And so just really thinking back to that, like, who does it serve for me to not be able to give people the benefit of the doubt, to not be able to assume positive intent? I think that that's just like an important thing to sort of pause on and wiggle in a little bit, because it's what fuels our online freaking toxic political culture. It's what makes it hard to have important dialogues. And it's no wonder. I've never thought of that as a symptom of burnout for me, but now that you mention it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so real.
mhm.
Like, I get so snappy and I get so frustrated, and I do my most boisterous, perhaps, water cooler venting with my colleagues when I
Mhm.
am really burned out, and we're just talking about how everything's going wrong, and just assuming that X, Y, and Z person is just trying to work against me, and they're being so whatever. When in reality, everyone's just doing. Typically, everyone is trying to do their best, and we're all just really, really struggling.
Yeah.
Or there is actually another crisis happening that's getting in the way, which is more often than not the case at my work.
I I feel like burnout can create apathy, which is really
Oh
hard.
yeah.
I often feel this in the space that I'm in when I'm working with people who are working with other vulnerable communities.
Yeah.
in programs where, like, me as not the person who's in the program is kind of like, "Oh, well, the person that you're complaining about right now might have X, Y, and Z, but of course you can't see that. You just think they're gaming the system or they're
Mm,
ignorant or they're doing all this other stuff." Where it's
yeah.
like, "Oh, because you are tired and burnt out and this is really hard and you're doing really hard work and you're doing 50 different jobs at the same time. So totally understand where you're coming from, which is really hard because then I think that gives people like, I don't know, health and welfare social workers a really bad name because I
Yeah.
have met a lot of people who are really great. I've also met a lot of people where I'm like, "Wow, you are the most cynical, jaded person I have ever met, and I feel like I am in a room with an energy vampire because I'm just
Yeah.
trying to have stories so that everybody can get their health needs met." It doesn't help anybody. It's like a trickle down effect, I suppose, and I would say this is part of the system. They're just trying to burn
Mhm.
you out as much and take away as many resources so that you
Well,
put
and
them in
that's
boxes and breeds a sense of, like, people having ill intent all the time.
yeah, the system of, and when we're talking about the system, it's the system of power, like, the system of oppression. Some people call it capitalism, inequality. It's like all of those things operate on the same principles and values within this larger system that we're all living in. And it really benefits that system if the people who are trying to help others are too tired to do their jobs, too apathetic to care about doing their jobs well, and then give those jobs such a bad name that other people that are paying for those systems, like the public, see them as really inefficient and ineffective because then they vote down improving those systems
Mhm.
and giving more money to those systems that would then
Mhm.
help them become more efficient and more effective. We see this a lot with public education. I'm just going to throw it out there. Public education is so severely underfunded that it can be really, really, really hard to invest in really the holistic resources and support that students really, really need, especially students these days who have, just grow up with a constant sense of like anxiety and doom from constant school shootings and constant climate events and constant, X, Y, and Z historic event in the news. They lived through the pandemic. Like bare minimum public services are not funded by the education
Mm.
models. The holistic support that students need is absolutely not funded. And so it's really hard for a public school to be producing the good outcomes, especially the way that we're testing students, but that's like a whole different
Well, and
thing.
there's
It's
also
a whole different rant.
there's also the school to prison pipeline too, right?
100%, yeah. That's if you're unfamiliar with that term, a lot of times future prison planning looks at third grade reading levels because there's a direct correlation between the amount of third graders who can read and the amount of future incarcerated folks that people are planning prisons for. So that's a whole nother prison
Yes.
industrial complex, prisons for
But it's
profit.
still,
It's
it's
all
still
a
part of
mess.
the yeah, so
It's
it's
all part of the same system. And so these schools are looking like they're not effective. So people are like, well, I don't want to give more money to a public education system that's not, providing me with good outcomes for my students. So I'm going to, fight against any new bonds that are going to serve them, and I'm going to give my money to private schools, and that just like continues to defund education, and it's all working in the same like
right.
towards the same goals for
Yeah.
these people, especially the people in really far right areas that rely on an undereducated public because in order for a democracy to thrive, you have to have a high quality public education. That's going all the way back to the Greeks, friends. Like this
And
is
that's
what
not
we've
to
built
say
our
that
system
that's
on.
not also to say that you have to have a higher ed to be informed either, right? I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. I'm just saying in general, I think right, to clarify, because I have also had some people who are like, "Oh, it's because they don't, people vote this way because they don't have a college degree." And I'm like, I have met
Oh
many
no.
very
Yeah.
smart people, very I don't know, whatever bucket you wanna put that person into who
Yeah.
does not have a college degree. That's a very elite, perspective
I
that
agree.
they should just take out a I mean, this person also was like, "They should just take out loans," and I'm like, "Hey, as a person who took out a bunch of loans, dumb. Don't do it. I'm not even using my
Ugh.
degree." Anyway, this is all to say these are the things that are on top of mine and run around, like little, like little hamster wheels, um,
Yes.
all in my head at the same time. I was also trying to be like, and do your job. Uh,
And do your job and manage your chronic health illness and figure out how
right,
to be neurodivergent within the system. Good luck.
right. So it's hard and it burns me out. Although funny story is that as we talk about these things, I get really excited and then my body is like, awake. Let's talk more about
Yeah.
this. Let's.
Yeah.
But that's also because I love to connect the dots. I told someone in the interview, I'm like, if I could, I'd have a board in the back and I'd be like, this person, and that's why I'm good at my job because I'm a good connector, quite
I'm a
honestly.
connector too.
So I am able to be like, let me do a little bit of research. I think this person needs to talk to this person, and let's go at this angle from here, and let's.
I love that.
But how can you do that if you don't want to come to work? If you
And if
don't
you get frustrated when
if
people speak.
right,
Yeah.
or, everything just feels like a big, hard struggle, and it just makes it really hard to do anything. So my intention into this year, into this new position is also to have boundaries. And
Boundaries.
understanding, like clear understanding of what the expectation is from all of us. My expectation is to just do my job. I think the reason why I pushed and have been burnt out, again, full circle, I'll say it again, is because I think I was trying to prove my worth, trying to prove that I was supposed to be here, trying to work myself into a job, because uh, the budgets are so small that make so
Yeah.
much work for myself that if I left that they would really feel it. I can't do it anymore. I'll just say it, I can't do that anymore. That it again, it's unsustainable.
And it's really hard when you're trying to work yourself into a promotion or a different job. Like,
Mhm.
because I don't know about you, but in the organizations I've been, there hasn't been a career path for me. So there
Oh
is
yeah,
no
no career
job
path.
above mine that I
Yep.
could go into. And so I'm like, well, maybe if I start acting like a director and doing the work of a director, then
Yeah.
they'll create a director position for me and I can actually be getting paid to do the work I'm doing. And that's not how it's
Yeah.
it's sort of it sort of worked out that way at my last role. Thankfully, I had some pretty amazing, frankly, women in charge ahead of me that the stars aligned.
Wait, that's
Well,
the
you've got to
exception to
have
the
this
rules usually.
You've got to have all the stars aligned because she had
Yeah.
been trying to do this for a while. So it was because we also had a new person above her and a new person above her because I was like 7 layers deep in this organization. So it just worked out, and it's so rare, but I see it happen all the time where people are at coordinator levels,
Ugh.
doing director level work or manager level work and not getting paid
Right.
for it because they just do the work that needs to get done. And then you find yourself especially frustrated because you're like, well, now not only is my normal job underfunded and undervalued, but now I'm doing the work of somebody way above me, and
Right.
it's definitely not
Well,
funded and valued.
and I think that's a nonprofit trying to go into a corporate system, because in the
Exactly.
capitalist
Yeah.
system, right? Because that's
Because in a
all.
corporate system, you can, like, there is money to be able to promote people or have multiple, even levels. Like, there isn't a,
There's job
I'm,
paths.
there's not a, I'm currently a climate justice advisor. I'm not a climate justice advisor one and can move into a two or a three or a senior climate. Like, that doesn't exist. It is just one. That is just
Yeah.
me. And there
Yeah.
isn't like iterations of like a coordinator one, a coordinator two, associate one,
Right.
associate. Like, that doesn't exist. And so being able to really look at your situation where it's at, and I think that's important. I'm so glad you called out the corporate structure thing because I think that is how a lot of these spaces run and are trying to feel, but don't have the flexibility or the financial backing to be able to like appropriately give their employees what they need. And so just being able to have those clear expectations with your team can create a more healing work environment. So
Mhm.
We're basically
Yeah.
trying to offer, some practices and tips and tricks to help yourself manage your own burnout, and I hopefully eventually help your colleagues adjust expectations for each other so that you all can help each other manage burnout while we all just work to change the whole system of
Yeah.
together work culture in these spaces
Right.
to make them more joyous work. We are excited to hear from other people about your weird stories of burnout and its unexpected symptoms or practices that you either manage or prevent burnout at survivingservicepod@gmail.com, or connect with us on our Instagram at surviving_service. Each episode, we're going to have our own interactive question and post where you can be a part of our community. So make sure you follow along and like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Erin, I'm so happy we got to chat today.
Me too.
We worked ourselves up into a nice energy frenzy. So.
I think so. I feel like I can craft now. So that's
Yay! We got there. We got to the crafting space.
we did.
Yeah, the difference between how we started and how we're ending is such a good vibe. So,
Absolutely.
always wonderful.
Well, thank you, Kat. We'll talk
Thank
next time.
you.
Bye.
Absolutely. Bye. Surviving Service is independently created and produced by Kat Davis and Erin Riley. Join the community and spark new connections by following us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at surviving_service, and reach out to share your own stories of service-driven work, all the things that make us laugh and cry, all the tips, tools, and tricks to get through by sending them to survivingservicepod@gmail.com. Together, we will go from surviving to thriving. Hang in there, we got this.